Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most tense and unpredictable situations unfolding in Eastern Europe right now.
The Belarus military conflict has reached its peak, and the chain of events now shaking the country is sending shockwaves across the region.
What once appeared to be internal pressure and scattered disagreements within the armed forces has now turned into a full-scale confrontation inside the state's own power structure. In this video, we're breaking down what happened, why it matters, and what could come next as Belarus stands on the edge of its most serious crisis in decades.
The situation in Belarus didn't escalate overnight. For months, signs of internal friction were slowly emerging.
Senior commanders were speaking less publicly, troop movements became more secretive, and reports surfaced of disagreements between the country's leadership and high-ranking military officials. All these hints pointed to a growing divide between the political elite and the army. Now, that divide has erupted into something far more dangerous.
The conflict has reached a point where neither side is willing to back down.
The leadership sees absolute control as essential for political survival, while factions within the military believe the situation in the country has deteriorated to a point where decisive action is necessary. As tensions grew, Belarus entered a phase that analysts describe as a pressure cooker. Discontent inside the armed forces started building.
Officers were reportedly frustrated with political interference, along with the burden of regional tensions and increasing military obligations.
Many felt that the government's decisions were pushing the country toward unnecessary conflict. This underlying frustration became the spark that ignited the situation. Once disagreements reached the operational level, the leadership attempted to clamp down hard. Instead of easing tensions, this move added fuel to the fire. The conflict reaching its peak means that the situation is no longer hidden behind closed doors. Troop deployments inside Belarus have shifted from routine readiness to strategic positioning. Various factions within the army appear to be aligning themselves based on loyalties, ideology, and personal interests. The leadership is deploying elite security forces to maintain control, while other military units have begun to express defiance.
This standoff has created an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear. Citizens are watching closely, unsure of how far things will go or whether open confrontation is imminent. The international community is unsettled by the rapid escalation. Neighboring countries are monitoring troop movements, intelligence reports, and diplomatic signals. Western nations are expressing concern over the possibility of the conflict spilling across borders or destabilizing the region.
Meanwhile, Russia is watching the events with particular interest, as Belarus remains a crucial partner and strategic buffer zone. A split inside Belarus's military could challenge regional dynamics and force other states to reconsider their positions. The geopolitical implications are becoming more complex with each passing day. Inside Belarus, people are experiencing a mix of fear, fatigue, and confusion.
For many citizens, the situation feels like the culmination of years of political tension, economic struggles, and increasing pressure from authorities. The sudden rise of military divisions has left the public questioning what the future holds. Some believe the conflict could lead to major political changes, while others fear it could bring instability or harsh crackdowns.
Families are preparing for the possibility of disruptions, and rumors are spreading quickly across cities and towns.
The leadership is applying every tool it has to maintain control.
State media is downplaying the conflict, presenting it as isolated disagreements or attempts by external actors to destabilize the country.
Yet behind the scenes, there are growing signs of panic. Authorities are increasing surveillance, restricting movement in certain regions, and quietly detaining individuals suspected of disloyalty.
At the same time, military leadership is under heavy pressure to demonstrate unity, even as internal fractures become more visible.
The more the leadership tries to suppress the truth, the more the cracks within the system begin to show.
On the military side, commanders are walking a fine line. Some believe loyalty is the only path to preventing chaos, while others argue that the leadership's actions have gone too far. This internal division is what makes the current situation so volatile. A military split is far more dangerous than a political protest or a public disagreement. It threatens the stability of the entire state structure. When officers stop following orders, when units begin questioning their chain of command, and when internal communication breaks down, the risk of a full-blown confrontation increases dramatically. What makes this conflict especially unpredictable is that both sides believe they are acting in the best interest of Belarus. The leadership insists that national security requires strict control, even if that means suppressing dissent. Military officers who challenge this position claim that real stability comes from accountability, transparency, and ending harmful political pressure.
These opposing visions of national security are at the heart of the current crisis. The more each side tries to assert its authority, the more intense the conflict becomes.
One of the turning points came when reports began circulating that certain high-ranking officers refused to carry out directives they believed were harmful or politically motivated. This level of defiance is extremely rare in Belarus's tightly controlled system. The refusal of orders symbolized a breaking point. It showed that the tensions had exceeded the limits of internal negotiation. When senior military figures challenge official commands, it sends a powerful message to the entire armed forces. It creates a ripple effect that encourages others to express their own concerns. The conflict has now reached a stage where the leadership is trying to demonstrate strength through forceful moves.
New commands are being issued, loyal units are being strategically positioned, and emergency meetings are being held.
Yet the opposition within the military is also gaining confidence, especially as more officers begin to voice their discontent privately or through controlled channels. These parallel actions create a dangerous atmosphere where one misstep or miscommunication could escalate the situation beyond control. The stakes are extremely high. A miscalculation by either side could trigger clashes between military units or confrontations between armed forces and security services. Analysts warn that such an event could rapidly turn into a national crisis. Once violence begins, the conflict could become far more difficult to contain.
The fear of escalation is one of the reasons international observers are monitoring the situation so closely. Regional security depends heavily on Belarus remaining stable, and the risk of internal military conflict threatens that stability. Citizens are also becoming more vocal, discussing the situation privately and online despite the risk.
Many people see the crisis as a sign that the country's long-standing political system may be entering a period of transformation. Whether that transformation will be peaceful or turbulent remains uncertain.
People are hoping for a resolution that avoids bloodshed and leads to meaningful change, but they are also bracing for the possibility that the leadership might resort to extreme measures to
maintain power. Economic conditions are adding additional pressure. With inflation rising, jobs becoming harder to find, and sanctions limiting opportunities, the public feels the strain.
The military, which is made up of ordinary citizens, is not immune to these pressures.
Families of soldiers are worried about the future, questioning whether the conflict will affect their loved ones or lead to dangerous situations. As economic frustration grows, it merges with political frustration, creating a climate where the public's tolerance for instability is declining.
Meanwhile, Belarus's allies and rivals are analyzing the conflict from different angles. Russia sees Belarus as a key strategic partner, and any instability could impact its own regional goals.
Western countries, on the other hand, are calling for restraint, transparency, and respect for the will of the people. These competing interests turn Belarus's internal conflict into a broader geopolitical issue. The outcome could shape regional alliances for years to come. Every statement, movement, or diplomatic action is now part of a larger strategic game. Back inside the country, the atmosphere has changed dramatically. In some regions, military checkpoints are more visible, communication is restricted, and people are noticing increased movement of security personnel. Public spaces feel tense. Rumors of disagreements between units travel quickly, sometimes exaggerating the truth but still contributing to the feeling of instability. The fact that the leadership hasn't fully addressed the situation only increases the uncertainty. The lack of transparency encourages speculation, and speculation fuels fear.
The crisis has also affected the morale of the military. Soldiers are trained to follow orders, not to question the political structure.
But when the chain of command itself becomes divided, morale can drop quickly. Confusion spreads when soldiers receive conflicting messages or see their leaders taking opposing stands. This confusion leads to hesitation, and hesitation becomes dangerous in a tense environment. Clear leadership becomes more critical than ever, yet clarity is exactly what Belarus currently lacks. There is also a growing concern about how long this standoff can continue without breaking into something more severe.
Both sides are preparing for different outcomes.
The leadership seems determined to use force if necessary, while dissenting factions within the military appear equally determined to resist actions they consider harmful to the country.
This balance of determination is what makes the conflict so fragile. Any attempt to assert dominance could trigger reactions that escalate the crisis instantly. The future of Belarus now depends on how the next steps are handled. A peaceful resolution would require dialogue, compromise, and a willingness to address the concerns raised by military officials. Yet the political environment in Belarus has not historically encouraged this kind of approach.
The leadership is known for its strict, uncompromising stance, and changing that stance would require acknowledging weaknesses.
Whether the leadership is willing to take that risk remains unknown. If the crisis continues to escalate, Belarus could face long-term consequences. Political instability could weaken the government's authority. Economic conditions could worsen further. The military could become increasingly fragmented. Regional relationships could become strained. All of these outcomes would create challenges that could take years to repair. The country stands at a crossroads, and the decisions made now will shape its future. For many Belarusians, the hope is that common sense will prevail.
People want stability, but they also want fairness and accountability. The military wants to protect the country, but it also wants to avoid being used as a political tool.
These shared values could become the foundation for a peaceful resolution, but only if the leadership recognizes the importance of addressing internal concerns honestly and effectively.
As the conflict continues to peak, one thing is clear: Belarus is entering a critical moment. The actions taken in the coming days could determine whether the country moves toward reconciliation, deeper conflict, or fundamental change. The world is watching, regional powers are preparing, and the people of Belarus are waiting anxiously to see what the next chapter will bring. Whatever happens next, this moment will be remembered as one of the most significant turning points in the nation's modern history. If the situation stabilizes, it could open the door to long, overdue reforms and a chance to rebuild trust. If it escalates further, Belarus could face one of the most difficult periods it has ever experienced.
The stakes are enormous, and the pressure on both the leadership and the military is unmatched.
As events continue to unfold, one thing is certain: The conflict has reached its most intense stage, and the coming developments will shape the future of Belarus in ways no one can fully predict.
That's the latest analysis on the Belarus military conflict as it reaches its peak. The situation is fluid, complex, and evolving rapidly, and we'll continue to monitor developments closely.
Thank you for watching, and make sure to stay tuned for more updates as we continue covering this major international event.